My name is Jerome Jacobs, and I've been connected to Gracegate for probably 6 years through another men's ministry. We actually came to know Robin and a few of the other blokes over here, and it was through being involved in community projects.
Hi, my name's Kelly, and I'm part of the supported living. I stay in the supported living house. I've been here for 7 weeks, and my pathway is to go to higher ground.
Hey, my name is Leon. Welcome to our Spark Room, where we normally hang out on a Tuesday.
Somehow, I ended up being involved with the men's life group through an invitation, and Robin put it out and said, "Hey, it'll be great, to have you participate." And I felt the calling. God called me to it, and over the years we were meeting at one of the homes where a lot of the guys hang out. And probably about 3 years ago, one of the guys called Jasom, and we ended up becoming really closely connected.
We've got a few of us in our little group, and we do a lot. We do a lot together outside of the church as well. We've got a sweet little group chat where we keep things nice and fresh with our meme Mondays. Little thing I started, constantly sharing little memes, and over the weekend it gives me a reason to look at my phone and try and find new content to make everyone laugh, because I like doing that. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, I had no idea really about God or anything, but this time in recovery, I do have a higher power, and I do call that God. And so this was really a big, important group for me, because I did want to learn more about God so I could connect better with my higher power and really get this thing.
But yeah, on Tuesdays we'll hang out here at church or at someone's house, something like that, and then have conversations about life and catch up with how people's weeks have been, and that kind of small talk stuff. And then we'll dive in a little bit deeper into topics on things that are kind of relevant to us at the time.
And so I would normally, in the evening when I get there on a Tuesday night, I would open up in prayer, and we'll go through the series, and Jason would finish in prayer. We finish off so strong. And then over the years, we've come to hang out at Gracegate as a bunch of fellas, and our friendship grew and became stronger, to the point where Robin, myself, and Jason ended up in the week having prayer time together. Again, prayer being the central focus in our relationship.
Yeah, we've done heaps of really cool stuff lately. I can think of several awesome examples of an impromptu dinner where a few people are keen for food, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, got some extra food, let's do something." And then we'll end up going to the mall and going shopping and buying hoodies, or going to the movies with everyone, and then going to Time Zone afterwards and playing games for 2 hours, trying to win some points. So yeah, that's kind of just a bit of a recap on our group here, and we'd love for a few more people to join our group.
Okay, so we learnt about temperaments and what kind of temperaments we were, and what our loved ones were, which helped us communicate better, and figuring out what my children were a huge help, because it made me understand them better. And we also just learn about how we can connect with God and pray, and it's been really, really good and interesting, and I'm really liking it. I'm really into it.
But here's the thing, at the end of the day, we started doing a bit of life together, and that's what life groups are about. It's about men just beyond the status quo of just being part of a group. We start living and doing life in other ways, and so we get to be there for one another. And so I'm thinking of one of the relationships that came out of just serving, being together, men. So practically from that point of view. So yeah, we owe this to God, because He makes all things happen. It's through His divine planning and space. and acknowledge His holiness and and we praise Him and give Him the thanks and the glory.
How awesome is that to hear, eh? And thank you guys. If you're someone that shared in that video, we really appreciate you. This is one of our Gracegate values. Life is better together, right? That's the whole point of life groups. And we honestly believe, I've heard Wes say it a few times, that it's not actually in rows like here today where your faith really grows deeper, but it's in circles. It's in those life groups where we're doing life together, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That is where our faith connection grows strong and deep. So if you're not in a life group, what are you up to? Get in one. So we encourage you guys, join a life group, do life with other people. That's what we're about. My name is Bree, if you don't know who I am, and I'm going to be sharing with you guys today. If you don't mind, I would love to start with a prayer. Is that okay? Let's pray. Hey God, we just want to invite you into this space, into this room as we connect and we share here today. I pray that the words I speak, God, will be yours and not my own. And I pray that you will open and soften each person's heart here today to hear your words and feel your presence. Amen. All right, guys. Sorry, I'm going to move this. I want it back a little bit. Okay. Today, we are continuing on. This is our third week in the Best Way to Live Life series. Wes kicked us off a couple weeks ago, and he spoke about, do you know, remember? Generosity. I heard someone say it. Generosity. Jordan continued last week, and what did he speak about? Grace and truth. I heard that. Sorry, I'm just turning this into a pop quiz now. All right. Does anyone know what I'm going to speak about? Chocolate. Not chocolate. It is one of my favorite things, but no, not today. Today, I am going to be sharing with you guys about compassion. Now, I thought I'd start by sharing with you a wee story about one of the first times that I really felt compassion deep in my heart, and I did something about it. So I was maybe about 15, 16. I was hanging out in the city, in Auckland City here with my friends, as you do, and we were just trolling the streets going from dairy to dairy because we were trying to find the best deals on chocolate, lollies, snacks, drinks, whatever we could find, you know. And as we're walking along the street outside of one of the dairies, there was this guy just sitting on the side leaning against the wall, and he was holding out his hand asking for money. And my friends kind of skirted all the way around him and walked into the dairy, kind of looking down their noses a wee bit judgmental. But I don't know why, but I felt something in that moment, and so I stopped. And I looked down at him, and you know, the moment I stopped, he started to tell me his story. And he said, hey, I've just been working up north, and I really need some money to get the bus home to my family in South Auckland. And that was key for me. I was from South Auckland, so I was like, oh, my friend, I will help you out. We'll get you back to South Auckland, okay? And so I reached into my wallet, and I got all my coins, all my cash I had, and as a broke 16-year-old, that was not a lot. But I actually gave everything I had in my wallet that day to this guy. And I left that moment. I said, hey, you know, say hi to your family for me, like have a safe trip. I felt good about myself, right? I was like, okay, done something good for the world today. And so I go into the dairy following my friends, and we, I don't know, linger around deciding whether we want Cadbury or Whittaker's for a while. And then when we come back out to the front of the store to the counter to pay, I see my friend from outside the dairy. He's now in front of us in the line at the counter. And he's using my money to purchase himself a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of liquor. And I just looked at him and I shook my head. I was so sad about this. And then he turned around, he looked at me with these big wide eyes, and he was like, oh girl, I'm so sorry. I really needed the cigarettes. And in that moment, my friends just killed themselves laughing. And they're like, Bree, you're so gullible. Honestly, you're going to get taken advantage of. You need to get street smart. And here's my teenage friends telling me that I need to grow up, basically. And isn't this what we're told about compassion, right? Compassion's good. We know this. That's obvious. But we're often told you only have compassion on the people who deserve it. Don't get taken advantage of. Don't have compassion on the people that are not going to be grateful or are not going to do the right thing with your compassion. Don't have compassion on the people who are unworthy. Does that sound familiar to you guys? That's kind of what we're told, right? And so today I want to have a bit of a deeper look into this. Who gets to judge who we do or don't give compassion to? And what does God have to say about compassion and how we're meant to feel it and use it? So to kick us off, we're going to look at the definition of the word compassion. So compassion literally means to suffer together. And among emotion researchers, which I only realized these were a thing this week when I was doing this, emotion researchers, they say it's defined as when you are confronted with another's suffering and you feel motivated to relieve that suffering. Now, I really like this. And in the article I was reading, it went into talk about the difference between empathy and compassion. Have we all heard of empathy before? Yeah? Yeah. It's a word that we hear a lot, especially in our culture today. And it's a good thing. Right? Empathy is when we're feeling someone suffering with them. It's like someone's down in the hole, and when we have empathy, we climb down and we're in that hole with them, like, hey, I'm here with you. That's feeling empathy, and we need that. That's human connection. But compassion is when we're motivated to do something about it. It's the action that follows. And I love this. It talks about compassion as being the emotion that is able to step away, to step out of the feeling for a second and actually climb out of the hole and be like, hey, I can actually help you get out of your hole. It's actually taking the action for someone that's suffering, and I love this. So that is what we're going to be speaking about today. When I started to have a look through the Bible at what Jesus says about compassion, I found something really interesting, and it kind of backs up what I was just sharing before. And that is that whenever it speaks about Jesus in the Bible having compassion, it's followed by the word and. It's followed by an action. So if we can, there's a few verses, we're going to go fast through them, but basically we see Jesus had compassion and he gave them sight. Jesus had compassion and he healed the sick. Jesus had compassion and he began teaching the people many things. And then Jesus had compassion and in this last verse, it actually leads along to where he feeds the 5,000 people. Compassion is the catalyst for the miraculous. It's through compassion that Jesus was moved to heal and to teach and to feed and to perform miracles. It was through compassion that the heart of Jesus was moved for the people, for us. And today we're going to have a look at a story that's actually found back in the Old Testament, which is a few hundred years before Jesus came to earth and was born. And often we can kind of get caught up in this thinking, right, that we have Jesus in the New Testament who's this lovely, compassionate, kind person, but then sometimes we think of God in the Old Testament as maybe a little bit grumpier or unmerciful or maybe not compassionate. But before we get into the story, I'm just going to roll through. There's so many verses in the Old Testament that share that actually God is compassionate, that he will rise up and show you compassion. Our God is full of compassion. He has compassion on all that he has made. And now this story is where God's going to show his compassion for the nation of Israel in the craziest of ways, a way that he's never done before. And he's trying to paint a new picture of his love for his chosen people. So this story is found in the book of Hosea. Hosea was a prophet, and a prophet is someone, there's a lot of them in the Old Testament, someone who is a man of God. They were always someone who's called by God. They weren't self-proclaimed. And Hosea was one of these guys. Now, a prophet was someone who God would give wisdom or maybe insight into the future. He would give the prophets a message to speak to the people, kind of like an interpreter for God. And often the prophets would be asked to do crazy things, to do little tasks or missions. Some of the prophets were asked specifically not to marry, and some of them were asked to marry someone specific. And this is the category that Hosea falls into, because he is asked to marry someone very, very unexpected. Now, this story is set in a time where the nation of Israel, so Israel is the people, God's chosen people, and I want you to lock this in your mind. Whenever we speak about Israel, it's speaking about us, okay? So Israel, the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, equals us. We can put ourselves kind of in that category, in that same people that God is speaking to. Now, the nation of Israel at this time in history, they are doing this fun little cycle over and over again where they start off, God has rescued them, He's blessed them, He's brought them to a promised land, and He's taking care of them. And then they decide, actually, we're going to do things our own way, and we're going to come over here. We don't care about you, God, anymore. We're going to ignore you. We're going to create our own gods. We're going to worship some different gods. We're going to really just be one with the culture around us, and we don't want a bar of you. When that happened, often things would consequently go really badly for the Israelite people, and then they would end up in this little pit of despair. There would be all sorts of things going wrong, and so then they would cry out to God, like, actually, God, can you save us? Can you please come rescue us now? Things were great when we were with you. So then they would cry out to God, and God, being the God He is, would rescue them, and things would go well again. And there was this cycle, and they didn't seem to learn, but we can't judge because we don't learn either, do we? And they would do this cycle over and over and over again. Now, we're at the point in their little cycle where they've turned away, they're unfaithful, they've turned their back on God. But things haven't started to go bad for them yet. And God is trying to actually rescue them before things go bad for them at this point. And this is where we meet the story of Hosea. Now, I saw it there before. There's a slide, so this is a wee disclaimer for you. The book of Hosea, which is hard to read, okay? I discovered this when I was preparing this message. There's a lot of history in this book, and there's a lot of prophecy, which basically means that the book refers to a lot of things that have happened in the past of the Israelites, and it refers to God sharing a lot of things that are going to happen in the future and pointing actually towards Jesus. It's a little bit hard to interpret sometimes or to get our head around. So if you're going to go read it for yourself, which I recommend that you do, there's a Bible plan on the YouVersion Bible app, and I found this really helpful in helping to understand the context of the book of Hosea. So if you're going to read it, go have a read of this plan, and it breaks down all the different chapters and the history, and it's going to help you out a lot. Okay, all right. We're going to get into the story. Are you ready? So this is the beginning of Hosea's story. It says in chapter 1, verse 2, when the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, He said to him, "Go and marry a prostitute, so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution. This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshipping other gods." Okay, let's stop there for a second, because this is crazy, right? This is crazy. God is literally asking Hosea, the man of God, the good guy, to go and marry a prostitute. Let's put this in terms of kind of our world, our life today, right? We've got Hosea. He is a man of God. He's faithful. He has this beautiful connection and relationship with God. He is, maybe he's sharing up the front of his church often, and everyone's inspired by his faith. Maybe all the church girls are always looking on, being like, "Oh, I hope he picks me. I hope he picks me to marry. I'm sure he's good looking." All the mums are like, "Oh, I hope he chooses my daughter." Hosea is a good guy, all right? He deserves a good wife. And he's there praying to God, like, "Hey, God, who do you have for me? Like, I want to follow you, and who would you like me to marry?" And God says, "Hosea, I want you to marry a prostitute." Now, the interesting thing when we read on is that Hosea does. He obeys God. There's no questioning that's recorded in the Bible. It just says, so he did. His relationship with God was strong enough, and he'd been around with God long enough that he knew even if he can't see what's around the corner, God's got his back and God knows what he's doing. So Hosea goes, to the street where the good church guys shouldn't go, and he goes to knock on the door, and he proposes to a prostitute called Gomer. And I don't know what Gomer is thinking in this moment. She's like, whoa, where is this going to come from? All right, this is great. Like, this is bizarre, right? Imagine this. And he's offering her this beautiful life of love and faithfulness, and he's going to care for her. He's going to take her away from the situation she is in and give her a home and give her a family. And Gomer says yes. And we don't know what's going on in her head, you know. Maybe she's got this little sliver of hope, like, hey, maybe I could be this person. Maybe I could be a wife, a mother. Maybe she's actually so broken that she just wants to get out of where she's in. She doesn't care who she goes with, but she's like, get me out of here. Or maybe she's at the point in her life where she doesn't care anymore. She doesn't care what happens to her or who she's with or where she is. So whichever of those reasons it might have been, she goes and she marries Hosea. And they do as God commanded. They start a family. And we're about to read the next couple verses, but I'm going to warn you, things get crazy. Because God asks Hosea and Gomer to name their children some pretty outrageous names. Now, names in the Bible have a lot of significance. They're always a part of the story. And these names are about God's disappointment and heartbreak, really, over the people of Israel. And this is key to remembering, is that this whole story is a parallel. Hosea's relationship with Gomer is a direct link to God's relationship with his people. So let's have a look at these crazy names. It says in verse 3, so Hosea married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she became pregnant and gave Hosea a son. And the Lord said, name the child Jezreel, for I am about to punish King Jehu's dynasty to avenge the murders that he committed at Jezreel. In fact, I will bring an end to Israel's independence. So he's basically asking them to name their oldest son a name that's kind of like a mark or a memory of a crime, of a murder that's been committed in the past. And we go on to the next verse, and it says, soon Gomer became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to Hosea, name your daughter Lo-Ruhamah, not loved, for I will no longer show love to the people of Israel or forgive them. And it goes on. After Gomer had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she said she again became pregnant and gave birth to a second son. And the Lord said, name him Lo-Ammi, not my people, for Israel is not my people and I am not their God. That's pretty harsh, right? That's pretty crazy. We see here in the names that God asks Hosea to name his children how upset he's become with the nation of Israel, his chosen people. So far as to say, actually, I don't know if I can do this anymore, guys. I don't know if I can keep being your God. I don't know if I can love you anymore. That is the amount of despair and hurt and heartbreak that God is in, agonizing over the nation of Israel. And what we're about to see is that same hurt and heartbreak is what Hosea is about to experience with his wife Gomer. The people have been unfaithful, and they've broken God's heart, and we're about to see Gomer is going to be unfaithful. And throughout chapter 2 of the book of Hosea, we don't know how or why, but Gomer leaves. She goes back to her life of prostitution. She leaves Hosea, this kind and gentle, loving man. She leaves her children, and she returns to her old life. Now, something that I did notice when I was reading this in a few different versions, and this is just me noticing, this is not 100% fact, but we see in the first verse with their first child, it points out that the first child was Hosea's son. However, for the second two children, it just says she became pregnant. We don't know for certain if they're Hosea's or not. And we know that she is unfaithful, and in the first verse, God had said she will have children through her prostitution. So Hosea is looking after these children who may or may not be his own. He's taking care of the family. Imagine how he's feeling. His wife, who was promised by God, who God instructed him to love, has run away. She's left. She's chosen something else. He's got to be feeling so hurt and betrayed, disappointed. I mean, how many of us would walk away and shut the door forever, right, after one indiscretion, much less what Hosea has been through? He's ready to end this. He's feeling the same way that God is feeling. I don't know if I can love you anymore. I don't know if you're mine anymore. But we see here, this is where things take a shift. Like a father wrestling over the wayward children who he loves, God is agonizing over this nation of Israel. He's hurt by their spiritual adultery, and yet in the very next breath, later on in the book of Hosea in chapter 8, he says, how can I give up on you? How can I hand you over? My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is ignited. You see, on one hand, we have a God who is, like Jordan spoke about last week, is wholly about truth, about justice. And then on the other hand is wholly about mercy and compassion and grace. And he wouldn't be God, right, if he was more of one and less of the other. He is completely both of these attributes. And it's actually later on down the track, when we see Jesus come, that this is completely brought into fruition, where through Jesus, he takes the full blow of his own justice instead of us. And the book of Hosea is literally this. It's anticipating Jesus' sacrifice for us. We find that all that remains is his love and his compassion. So as we come back to the story in chapter 3, God speaks again to Hosea, and he instructs her to go and get his wife back. Then the Lord said to me, go and love your wife again, even though she commits adultery with another lover. This will illustrate that the Lord still loves Israel, even though the people have turned to other gods and love to worship them. It's pretty incredible, right? Or maybe you're thinking, no, this is pretty stupid. What the heck? Hosea has to go and take back this cheating wife? It is crazy. And we see, when we read on, it's not even that simple, because Gomer has got herself into a situation where she can't just come back home even if she wanted to. We don't know how, but she is now not a free woman. She's having to sell herself as a slave. Her life is not her own anymore. Her only way out is to be rescued, to be redeemed. And so we see that her husband comes into the marketplace. And when I had a look at how slaves were sold at this time, they were often put up on like a rock, almost like a pedestal, usually chained to it. They would be stripped naked so prospective buyers could clearly see who they're going to buy and that they're suitable for whatever work that they have in mind. So Gomer is sitting there at her lowest point. She is not a free woman. She's chained to this rock. It is the epitome of dehumanization and shame for her right now. And then Hosea shows up at the marketplace. In these days, the price for a slave, the price for a life, was 30 pieces of silver. And who knows, maybe no one else was willing to pay that much for her because they didn't think she was worth it. But Hosea comes and he buys her back. And it says he bought her back for 15 pieces of silver, 5 bushels of barley, and a measure of wine. And when you convert that into monetary value, it is exactly 30 pieces of silver. He paid for her life in full. And the interesting thing is, after this, he renews his vows with her. He says, "You are my wife. I'm going to be faithful to you, and you be faithful to me." He renews the covenant of their marriage and takes her home. And for the first time, Gomer is able to experience what real love, unconditional love is like. She didn't have to do anything to receive her freedom. Her husband paid for her something he didn't have to do. Out of his compassion, he takes her back. And at this time, we see both Gomer and the nation of Israel, they believe love is transactional, a commodity to be bought and sold. It's about self-gratification and getting what you want. And this is where God is trying to show the nation of Israel through Hosea, no, that's not what it's about. That's not what my love is about. My love is unconditional. I'll always redeem you. I'll always rescue you. I'll always have compassion on you, and I'll never turn my back on you. So what do you think we can learn from this story today? What's interesting is throughout the rest of the book, we don't know what happens in the end of the story of Hosea and Gomer. We don't know if they live happily ever after. I hope they do. But what we do know is that Hosea is actually ridiculed and mocked for his marriage with her, and even more so for taking her back. And isn't that the way of things today still, right? We're ridiculed and mocked for showing compassion to those that others deem unworthy. The thing is, in the same way that Hosea redeemed Gomer, and that God showed redemption to the nation of Israel, and later Jesus sacrifices and pays for us in full through his death on the cross. Remember, it's through compassion that we see the miraculous, that we experience the love of God. Compassion is not just a feeling, it's followed by an action. Now, the point of this story is not to tell you to go and take back a cheating partner or rekindle a relationship that has hurt you. We still need to have boundaries in our life, right? But the point of this story is to ask you, is your heart full of compassion? Or has your heart hardened over time? We all have things that maybe we've experienced, disappointments, maybe mistakes that we've made or things that we've gone through. And maybe we've allowed our heart to become hard to protect ourselves. But the thing is, with a hard heart, it's difficult to feel compassion for someone else. And this is what we're called to do. There's a verse in Ezekiel 36, verse 26, and I love this. It's God speaking, and he says, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I'll remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." This is a promise from God to us. And I have prayed this for myself in the past, asking God to give me a new heart, a heart of flesh, when I know I've allowed myself to put up walls and to shut people out. And maybe today it's the same prayer that you need to pray to God, asking him to give you a heart of flesh, remove the heart of stone. What is the action step that you need to take? Where is compassion leading you? Maybe it's asking God to change your perspective on a person or a situation where you know you've hardened your heart. Remember, we don't necessarily get to be the judge. We don't get to be the judge of who is and isn't worthy of compassion. And often we like to give compassion to those whose values align with ours, or who we like, or we see, hey, they're trying really hard to do right. But no, just like Hosea was called to love and give compassion to his unfaithful, undeserving wife, we are called to give compassion to those that deserve it the least. Maybe for you. You feel empathy for other people. You're down in that hole with someone. You're like, man, yeah, this sucks. But hey, maybe it's time for the action part, right? Maybe it's time for you to get out of the hole and reach down and help someone out of there with you. Or maybe you're someone who is really compassionate and you already show so much compassion to other people. You go out of your way to help people, to put others first, to care in really practical ways. The interesting thing is often the most caring and compassionate people are sometimes the least caring and compassionate for themselves. So maybe today you need to show yourself compassion. Maybe you need to care and nurture your own self as much as you do for those around you. Because you see, God just doesn't want to show up for everyone else. He wants to show up for you. And it's through compassion that we see this beautiful, clear, and new picture of who God is. It's through compassion that Gomer learned what real love is. It's through compassion that others get to experience a God of love, maybe for the first time in their lives. And it's through being able to be compassionate with your own life that maybe you'll get to see a new picture of God. The best way to live life is not going to be the easiest, right? It's not going to be the most comfortable or the smooth sailing. And do you know what? We might get ridiculed. We might get mocked. We might get called weak. But ultimately, we are called to soften our hearts, to allow God to put a new heart in us, and to live lives of compassion.
Are you trapped? Burdened? Has your heart been hardened? Is there something that weighs on you, like a mistake, crouching on your chest while you sleep, pushing you further and further into the deep? Its weight is like a cast iron shackle, cold and wet, dragging you beneath the seas. But maybe this burden is not some docile thing. Maybe it's alive, and it burrows into you, clawing its way into your conscience, leaving behind a trail of guilt, remorse, and shame. Now I want you to picture this burden. Hold it in front of you in your hand. See it. Or maybe it's on top of you, strapped to your shoulders, and maybe it's heavy. It's so heavy that your knees feel weak and your arms get tired and your back is aching and your heart hurts. Maybe it's not even a creature of your own design. Maybe it's someone else's situation that's wrapped its fist around your heart and squeezes with every step. Every breath causes pain, and it's panging, it's stinging, it aches, and it drains you. But it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to eat away at us. Why? Because His name is power. His name is healing. His name is life. He breaks every stronghold. He shines through the shadows. His glory burns like fire. He is the Son of the Almighty God, the Creator who created you, who designed you, who knows you before you even spoke a word. That weight on your shoulders, the mistake in your hand, He has overcome it. He is working in it, and He is walking with you through it. So give it over to Him who loves you. Give it over to Him who is power, who is healing, who is life and love, and who has everything under control. Jesus.